How are you liking EVE Fanfest so far?
It's great. It's always every time it's the kind of the same feeling that you remember the last years and you think like, wow, it's going to be all the fans, it's going to be all this emotion. You're also, of course, a little concerned as well because we'll present plans. How will those be received? But it always kind of catches me by surprise, just the energy in the room. How invested people and how excited they are about the EVE universe.
There were a lot of big announcements this year with EVE Odyssey, with Dust 514. I think by far the biggest was Dust 514, that it'll be live on 514 this year. And the economy, they're starting to integrate between the Dust and the EVE corporations. Can you talk about how you're able to get the single shard running for both of these different, a console and a PC?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting with Dust is that we had, as was talked about in one of the presentations today, we had experimented with doing an EVE mobile client back in 2006. And we found back then that we couldn't support that. It would simply bring Tranquility to its knees. So we knew that there were changes that we needed to make to the architecture to support something like that. So we start on that journey a year later. And then as we work on that, we develop Crest, which is really our solution for more scalable networking for the server cluster that drives the single shard universe that people know as the EVE universe or Tranquility, which is the name of the server. But then when Dust starts to come online and we start talking about the idea of, wouldn't it be cool if the connection with Dust was actually real time and something you did on the Dust side could affect EVE directly and vice versa? And then we started looking at what's happening on the technology front and we realized, wait a second, there are plans here already in motion that fit actually really well with this grand vision. So we decided to just go for it. And now we've been running Dust on TQ actually ever since January of this year. And the numbers are looking really good. So we're actually, we're pretty confident in now when we launch the game on 5/14, the 14th of May, that we'll have the capacity to support the onslaught of new players.
Can you talk a little bit more about the hardware you're using to run all this?
Yeah, so Tranquility is really a server cluster. It's about the size of a classroom, all the computers together. Now, it has actually shrunk in recent years just because the manufacturers of hardware are finding ways to make these machines smaller and more thermally efficient. But still, it's a lot of computers that are connected together in a pretty complicated network topology, which we have actually been simplifying in the last few years. And it's heavily load balanced, and also we have a lot of caching layers. So we're caching the data on different layers of the infrastructure so that the last thing you want to do is to have all of our players hitting, for instance, the database, which is at the center of the actual supercomputer that's driving this all. We don't want them to be hitting that on every transaction. So there's a lot of things that happen when they're peeking into data, they're looking at stuff in the game where they're seeing cached information. But then once they go and make the actual transaction, then of course we have to validate that in the database.
Now, do you always have those servers online, or do you use something like virtual machines too?
We have started using virtual machines as well, and that's becoming a portion of our infrastructure. VMs have become very popular in recent years, and they've been able to sort out the issues that we had initially. We actually tried back in 2008 to run the EVE server in a VM, and it just didn't work. There wasn't enough performance there to support it. But things have changed drastically in recent years, and also we've changed our architecture quite a bit, where we've taken different parts of the infrastructure and separated that into its own service or application layer. And so we're able to run those completely isolated, and some of those we can run in virtual machines.
What kind of database are you running in the back end?
We're running a Microsoft SQL database, heavily souped up, 64-bit. It has an array of solid-state drives to do all kinds of caching of the data, and it's a very beefy machine with lots of memory.
And during upgrades, do you bring the server down, or do you just bring a part of the cluster down while you're performing the upgrades or maintenance?
Yeah. For some upgrades or maintenance, we can actually keep the server up and running. But unfortunately, for a lot of the work we do, we have to bring the server completely down. In the last few years, we've been actually working hard on improving this. And our goal is really to move all of the critical services into isolated application environments so we can keep those up and running while we upgrade other components of the game. And this is becoming increasingly important now with Dust, because Dust is connected to the same infrastructure. And so we don't want to have the situation where we're having to bring down the entire house just because a small change is maybe required for EVE or for Dust. because, you know, the other game will not be as understanding of those changes. So it's very important for us to actually separate this so we can do rolling updates.
In regards to the servers, where are they held? Are they in Iceland?
No. We, back in the day when we started operating EVE Online, the internet connectivity with Iceland was extremely spotty. And so it was a given that we could not operate the server in Iceland. So it's actually housed in the London Docklands, where there's great connectivity to the internet backbone. So we have it there in a data warehouse.
Is there anything else to talk about that I have not touched upon yet?
Well, I mean, I guess the thing that is kind of interesting and maybe is hard to put into perspective is that because it's a single shard game, it means that everybody is playing the same game on the same server cluster so they can all meet. And that means that we have these massive battles, like the Battle of Asakai that we had recently, where over 3,000 pilots were fighting in the same solar system. And our PCU record as well, so PCU, peak concurrent users, the number of players that you have playing the game at the same time. It's currently at 63,170 for EVE Online. And to try to put that into perspective, you know, if those people were all sitting in chairs next to each other, then that's over 30 kilometers of people, which is a lot when you think about it. But then the numbers that we haven't been disclosing so far is that now we have the Dust players playing as well on the same server cluster in real time. So our peak concurrent record is actually far higher now, which is we call the combined EVE universe number. We're hoping actually to be able to break the 100,000 barrier this year, but that will rely on the players to actually come and play the game at the same time.